very warm welcome to our partners and to the wider industry. Thank you so much for joining us today on this webinar. This is the second of our Insight webinar series. So you may have caught our Data Hub webinar earlier in the season. And this is the second one in which we will be talking about corporate travel and past flight emissions. If you don't know me, my name is Alex. I work in product management here at Travelist, specifically leading our transport work. Cool. So on the agenda today, we're first going to have a quick chat about Travelist itself, in case you're unaware. We'll talk about who we are and some of the work that we've done in this space. Next, we'll get an introduction to sustainability in the corporate travel space and learn about why that's so important. Then we'll do a deep dive into flight emissions for corporate travel and speak a bit about how the travel impact model can now be used for past emissions reporting and for setting granular goals for emissions reductions, as demonstrated with a case study that we'll also present. So with that, let's get going. I am really pleased to be joined today by two experts in this space, both of which are from Travelist partner organizations. So we've got Dennis Tietz. Dennis is based in Zurich and has been at Google for 12 years. He's currently leading strategic partnerships for the travel impact model and Scope 3 for Google globally. Following a deep passion for sustainability, Dennis also leads all of Google's public engagements on the topic of sustainability in Switzerland. We're also joined by Olivia Ruggles-Bryce, who leads on global sustainability for travel management company BCD as their VP of Sustainability. So welcome and thank you to you both. So to start off, I'd like to introduce you to Travelist and why we're involved in this work. Travelist is a global, independent, not-for-profit, founded in 2019 by Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex. Through our work, we aim to bring sustainability information to the mainstream in order to help people make more sustainable choices. And we do this through a pre-competitive coalition of some of the biggest names in travel and tech, representing a combined market value of over $3 trillion. We also work with an independent advisory group of world-leading academics and sustainability experts. Now, this multi-stakeholder collaboration is really key to our work. Within this pre-competitive space, our partners are really able to work together and to scale some of these things beyond what any one individual company would be able to achieve on their own. And as you can see here, our partners are a powerful coalition of real technology change makers in this space. Now, the first project that we were really able to scale together was the travel impact model, or the TIM, as we call it. You'll hear much more about the TIM from Dennis later in the presentation. And you can also get much more detail on it from a webinar that we actually ran last year. But essentially, this is our flight emissions model that we use to tell travelers about the impact of flights. By making this data available not only to our partners, but also to the rest of the industry, we've been able to put this information in front of travelers as they search for flights. And you can see here how it appears just on a few examples from some of our partners, starting with Google and Skyscanner on the right here. And then here are a few more examples. We've got some from trip.com and trip.biz, which is their corporate travel business, as well as Expedia. You'll notice on every single one of these platforms, the information appears slightly differently. This isn't something we sort of mandate. It remains up to the adopter to figure out how best to present the information to their travelers. But the objective remains the same. We want to ensure that travelers can easily access emissions information about flights as they do a search. And just to round out some of these examples, here are a couple of GDSs. We've got Amadeus and Sabre, who again are able to use the TIM in some of their products as well. So by encouraging the adoption of this data, we've been able to achieve enormous scale. We now know that the TIM emissions information has appeared in over 130 billion searches worldwide, which is honestly incredible. And this is just from using the TIM at that point of search. So when someone is actually looking to book a flight in the future. But we know that there are other use cases for this kinds of data. And an incredibly important one of those is within corporate travel and using this data for past emissions reporting, which is what we're going to talk about today. We know that while corporate travel may represent a smaller proportion of travel than leisure, it's an incredibly important sector because of the many significant sustainability efforts going on in that space. And so to talk you through some of the sort of sustainability and corporate travel landscape, we now will have Olivia join us. So Olivia, with that, I will hand over to you.
Thank you, Alex, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here participating in this webinar. So as Alex mentioned, I'm Olivia Ruggles-Bryce. I'm Vice President of Sustainability at BCD Travel. We are a corporate travel management company, and we help companies travel smart and achieve more. And as part of that, sustainability is an important element of what we do internally, obviously, but also with our clients. We have 15,000 team members across 170 countries to do that. Before I dive into the sustainability element, I wanted to just give a picture of what corporate travel is, how big it is. So you can see some data here. In 2025, the business travel industry is estimated to be worth about $1.5 trillion. And is an important element of the overall travel and tourism industry, accounting for about 25% of spend. Research by GBTA, the Global Business Travel Association, shows that for every $1 a company spends on business travel, the net profit yield is around $14.50. So that's why companies invest a lot in business travel, because it drives their business objectives. And if you look at the BTN top 100 corporate travel companies, those are the companies that are spending most on corporate travel. The highest spent $450 million in 2024, and that was Amazon. So corporate travel is an important part of the travel industry. It's also important for businesses, but it obviously does not come without an impact on the environment, generating emissions. A large proportion of business travel is air travel, and so that's what we're going to focus on today. There are some important drivers behind sustainability in corporate travel. First of all, as most of you on this call would know, business travel is an identified category in Scope 3, according to the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. So there is a requirement for companies that are reporting Scope 3 to also report their business travel emissions. And as we'll see in a minute, as regulations come in, these need to be audited as well. So data becomes more and more important. Around 20%, 1 in 5 of top travel programs have identified travel emission reduction targets. So within their Scope 3, they have identified a reduction for travel. And although that's only 1 in 5, it's still a significant amount of travel when you look at the bookings that these companies are making. But GBTA have also recently run and are about to launch the second iteration of their acceleration challenge, which shows how advanced corporates are when it comes to managing their travel sustainably. And they found a maturity of 1.3 out of 5. So there's still a lot of work to do. And so as a company, we are working with our customers to try and drive awareness of this. And it's great that Travelist have also prioritized corporate travel in this sense. So if we move on to the next slide, why is sustainability important for corporate travel? Well, I already alluded to the legal requirements. So We are seeing government mandated reporting in many countries in the world. And although I think we're having a bit of a backwards and forwards in some countries, but we still have significant requirements that large companies need to adhere to. And as I mentioned before, the majority of those come with a requirement for auditability as well. So in the EU, we have the CSRD, which is already in place for some companies and will be required in a couple of years for other large companies. We have new legislation in California, in the UK, and other parts of the world. So there's increasingly a legal requirement for companies to report their emissions, and within that, their travel emissions. As we'll see in a minute, it's not just about compliance, but it's also about driving real benefits to the company itself. So we've done some research that shows that the more sustainable a travel program is, the more cost effective it is. So being sustainable when you look at your corporate travel can also drive cost savings. And for those of you that know, or are indeed travel managers, if there are travel managers on this call, cost savings is a key part of corporate travel, and sustainability can help drive that. Can also drive traveller well-being. This is increasingly an important theme within corporate travel, is how you engage employees and how travel becomes a benefit, not a hassle for them. And by deploying some of the strategies that you can to make travel more sustainable, it also brings benefit to the employees, such as direct travel, more productive time, and even thinking more carefully about what trips need to happen. And then the final point is more of a kind of reputational one. So for the companies themselves, having good, robust, sustainable travel programs can help build into their sustainability narrative. And the more robust it is, the less they are at risk of greenwashing. But then for the industry as a whole, we know travel is going to grow. We know there is no easy solution to aviation emissions. There is an imperative to take action, the action that we can take in order to make sure that corporate travel can continue in the future and not become a target. Um, so what do we mean by sustainability in the context of corporate travel? So if we could move to the next slide. We, along with Advito, who are our in-house consulting group, who have one of the most advanced sustainability consulting practices in business travel, we've developed a framework, and it's fairly simple. And there are four elements to it. The first is travel smart. So this is about really thinking about whether the trip that you're taking needs to happen. Does it have ROI for the company? Is it are the right number of people going? Can somebody more local go? So do we really need to do the trip? And that's always the first question that you need to think about. If it is decided that the trip does need to happen, then we can look at traveling better. And what we mean by traveling better is using more sustainable forms of transport. So, for example, by taking a train instead of flying, if that alternative is available, or by using more efficient aircraft. And this is where the travel impact model comes in, because that can really help you make that decision and give the right information so that you can make that choice. But even on the hotel level, you can look at staying in sustainability certified hotels, which is another work stream that Travelist has going on. But you can make some decisions that can really impact positively the sustainability of your travel. And then the third area is around sourcing sustainably. So this is more for at the company level rather than at the traveler level, but by partnering with sustainable suppliers, either on the hotel side or the air side, but really embedding that into the procurement process. And then finally, once all other options have been considered and implemented, there is the opportunity to invest in high quality offsets or carbon removal, or indeed sustainable aviation fuel. So that's the kind of framework that we look at around sustainable travel. If we move on to the next slide, I just wanted to share this piece of research with you. As I mentioned, sustainability can also come with cost savings. And if you take a look here, you can see some examples of that. So, for example, shifting from air to rail can have significant cost savings, and it's always possible to find an example of a rail journey that costs more than a published flight. But if you look into it, quite often that ends up not being the case, and overall there's significant savings for rail, obviously where rail is available. I think the other one to look at really, which is interesting, is shifting to more fuel efficient aircraft. You can get some quite significant emissions reductions and no cost difference because airlines are not pricing their tickets based on the type of aircraft that's being used. So there's a huge opportunity there. Direct flights a little bit more expensive, but significant travel and wellness benefits as well. Um, so you can take a look at that. And actually, if you go to Advito's website, they have a whole report based on this. So I would urge you to go and take a look at that. Anyway, so how can good data drive positive impact in corporate travel? The more the more accurate the data is, particularly when it comes to air travel, the more you are able to measure and report your progress. You can also pinpoint actions at a strategic level. So you can really look at the routes that the company is flying, the most popular routes. So, for example, between London and New York is always a key one. And you can look and see which airlines are your travelers using, and are they the most efficient, or are there some decisions you can make about which airlines you're partnering with to try and encourage travelers to move to airlines with more efficient fleets, for example. So you can really use data to identify that. You can also see, the impact of long haul flights versus short haul flights, who's flying where, and really try and set some strategies that address wherever your largest emissions are. Um, the way corporate travel works is that there are decisions that are taken at the company level, but then also travelers have the ability to make decisions when they are searching and booking for their flights. And so with accurate and good travel data, you can put that information in front of those travelers at the point of the decision making, and they can see, for example, if there are two or three flights that are similar in terms of route cost, timing, etc., and they can decide to take the one with the lowest carbon footprint. And to do that, you need good data. So you need data, and I think that we'll go into in a minute how the travel impact model is kind of put together. But you need data that really goes down to the level of the aircraft to be able to do that. Once you have that data, you can also use it to build forecasts. So, for example, looking at what your forecasted travel emissions might be based on employee growth, business growth, and you can start managing that, setting budgets, for example, in the same way as cost budgets work. Departments or divisions, teams can have targets for the emissions that they are allocated. And we've had a couple of examples of clients that have set budgets and have got to the end of Q3. And we had one example of a client where their American sales team had run out of emissions. So they had to work within the company to kind of rectify that. But it's a really good way, and you can only do that with good data. And then the final piece is that you can apply a carbon fee to the emissions of a flight. It could be a shadow fee or it can be an actual fee, which really shows the real cost of travel. So if you add on the environmental cost to a flight, then it becomes more comparable. And this is where, for example, a cheaper indirect flight may actually become on par with a slightly more expensive direct flight once you start to add in the cost of carbon. So all of these are ways that good data can really drive positive impact in corporate travel. However, there's still a lot of challenges around it. And those of you that work with travel data a lot will know that it's very messy. It can come from multiple different sources: the travel management company or the airlines, the hotels, expense reports, and it can be really difficult to actually gather together all the data that you need, especially for reporting. On On top of that, there are many different methodologies and approaches for measuring air, hotel, rail, car, and quite often you find different methodologies deployed by different players in the ecosystem. So a TMC or a supplier or an expense a report may be looking at different ways of measuring things. So that can make it really, really difficult. And this lack of consistency can even come sort of across the board. So you could get an instance where a traveler might be looking at one number when they're booking their flight, but then a different number is reported. So if you are kind of looking to manage and using budgets and that kind of thing, then there's an inconsistency in terms of what travelers think they're doing and booking compared to what is actually reporting, and that causes not only confusion but somewhat undermines confidence in the whole endeavor. And so this is where a methodology such as the travel impact model comes into play. So it's, as Alex shared, it's been deployed at point of sale for some years now with some success. And so it's great that we're now moving to a point where we can use the travel impact model for reporting as well. So with that, I'll hand back and we can
Yeah.
hear about that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Olivia. And with that perfect segue, we will now hand over to Dennis from Google to talk to us about past emissions with the TIM.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Olivia. And great insights and background that you've already been giving. And I'm really happy to join this webinar. And I'm going to echo some of the things that you already referred to and trying to explain a little bit how we think about the travel impact model in terms of past emissions. As Alex mentioned, located in Zurich, and in case you're wondering, the image in my background is representing part of the office space of the Google Zurich office, where the engineering team working on TIM actually is located. So I thought that would give it a very nice bit of context for what you're seeing in my background. But back to the presentation, when we look at the TIM and a little bit of the history, it was developed also for Google Flight Search, and that was the first place it was actually displayed. When the team was looking at emission factors, they quickly realized that when you just look at distance-based emissions, you wouldn't have a lot of comparison options when you're looking at flights between two destinations. So TIM was developed to address that need for more accurate and differentiated emission data between different airlines and different aircrafts on the same routes. And that's what you're seeing here in this picture, how TIM can actually display different future-looking emission factors emissions between different airlines. When we go to the next slide, you can see that I'm going to give you a little bit of background on how TIM is actually working. In case you're interested in all the details of that, because this is going to be fairly high level, there's a webinar from travelers that was actually done in December 2024, where my colleague Jana was going into much greater depths into how this model is actually being built. So for now, I'm going to just say that the differentiation here between TIM and other models that have been used in the past is that it's made much more granular. We look at the distance of a route, but we also look at the aircraft type that is being used. And then we can calculate the actual total fuel burn for the flight using a combination of kosher carbon ISO 14083 factors to calculate everything that is in the well-to-wake emissions for this particular flight. So meaning anything in the upstream production of the fuel up to the final burning in the aircraft will be calculated into this model. We actually also use seat information and seat multipliers by the different airlines to determine the capacity of these aircrafts that are flying. That will also influence the output. And finally, the model applies load factors for the aircraft to really arrive at a very specific and very accurate carbon estimate for these flights. And again, I think we're sharing the link as well to the old webinar where you can watch how this model works in more detail. But this is the top level view of how this model is actually working. So if we move on to the next slide, one important thing that I also want to mention, looking back at Tim, is that this model is being controlled to a certain extent by the advisory committee that has been formed around it in June 2023. It includes experts from the industry who are discussing the further development and the accuracy of this model. Also experts from civil society and academia, plus we have 2 government observers on this board. They meet quarterly and are coordinated by the ICCT as a technical secretary, just to make sure that we have independent control of how this model is accurately reflecting what is happening day to day in the aircraft industry. So just highlighting that again, and if we move on now, we can talk about how we thought about the need for TIM in scope 3 or carbon emission reporting. When you look at a typical company, the visibility into the supply chain and the emissions that happen in the supply chain is the main challenge when you're looking at reporting and reduction of these emissions. So when you look at scope 1 and 2, which you're all probably familiar with, most companies have full visibility and control there. They know what they are producing and what they're emitting on the, let's say, manufacturing machines that they have in their factories. You can always look at your electricity bill and the GHG emissions that contribute to your electricity bill based on your supplier. So you got these more or less under control. And scope 3, however, represents for most companies over 70% of their total corporate emissions. And that's where it gets a lot messier because the supply chains are very long, distributed globally, and there's little to no data available. So what most companies are doing, 94% of companies here actually, according to SBTi, they use activity or spend-based estimates to actually come up with some kind of number to understand how their scope 3 emissions are actually built up. Now, we can improve that, we thought. If we go to the next slide, there's a lot of things that can be improved by having more accurate data, because when you can't see what you're actually emitting, you can't manage these emissions either, right? So 81% of companies report that they struggle to influence suppliers because they don't really know where the hotspots are in their scope 3 emissions, where the largest emissions are happening. Due to the lack of information, 57% of companies believe that the only way to decarbonize is to reduce procurement budgets or to reduce the activity, for example, flying, which is not quite correct. As Olivia has already shown, there are some other levers that you have. And for most companies, there's actually a missed reporting opportunity by not understanding these emissions. So summing this up is, without supplier-specific data, companies always struggle to identify the true emission hotspots, and they can only reduce emissions by spending less or doing less, which is a missed opportunity for supply chain optimization and innovation. Because as we will see with flying, for example, if you only have the option to fly less or to compensate with buying sustainable aviation fuels, you will either have less impact on your business results by flying less, or you will have a very large sum that you need for compensation. So I think improvement in the data underlying this can help companies save costs without necessarily reducing these activities. So if we go to the next slide, the idea behind TIM for corporate travel reporting is really to have very precise and granular accounting data that your teams can use to generate insights into travel patterns. For example, what are your most emitting routes? Where's the most travel happening? Are there alternatives for these routes, or are there alternatives for these travel modes that you're using? Excuse me. Which can then be used into smart policies, like, for example, mandating that for certain routes, specific aircraft is being used, or specific airlines, or that you switch from air to rail for specific traveling. And this drives emission reductions without curtailing business travel. If we go to the next slide. Excuse me, as I'm regaining my voice. We have built a Scope 3 reporting product based on the TIM model. So what we have now is past emission data for Scope 3 in TIM. It has historical data all the way back to 2019. It supports multi-year versions of this and consistent reporting periods. We're covering 100% of flights that have happened globally in that time. And in that model, we also have multiple fallback data sets and methods to adapt to your own travel data availability, because you might not always be having, when you're looking back, all the data that are needed for the most accurate calculation, but we still have some fallbacks here to help you understand those emissions. This Scope 3 emission data set, or past emission data set, is in compliance with GHG protocol and the reporting requirements listed there. And we are currently working towards independent assurance for this model, so that companies who help other companies reporting on Scope 3 emissions, for example, can make sure that this is auditable and assured data. If we go to the next slide, please. We will see that this can have quite a large impact. And now I'm referring back to what Olivia was already explaining. When you consider a flight between London and New York that has 12% lower than average emissions based on TIM calculations, this is equivalent to a business flight from London to Dublin, for example. So it's quite significant. And if you understand this data, if you understand that in the past you have maybe used aircraft or flights or airlines with higher emitting travel, and you now understand that you can, for example, move to aircraft or airlines that have 12% lower than average emissions, you already see that there's a lever that you can that you can apply to actually lower emissions without necessarily downplaying or reducing your air travel. So that's just a very specific example, but I think it really clearly highlights the opportunity that is there to achieve emission reductions without curtailing the business. Now, if we go to the next slide, TIM for business travel reporting and carbon reductions is available now. It's non-commercial, so you can access this for free. It's granular and precise, like the TIM model for future flights. It has the same granularity and precision. We've actually tested it on different corporate data sets, and Alex is going to talk to you about a case study that we have done together with Sabre in one of the next slides. And we have seen that at around 10% or more, emission reductions are possible without halting your air travel or your business travel. And again, Olivia mentioned it already, air travel is the largest part of corporate travel, or of corporate travel emissions at least. So this is a very large lever for companies to reduce their air travel or their business travel emissions. And we hope that this model can help companies understand their travel patterns, generate insights that will then inform smart policies for these companies and their future flight choices. And we're working actually with a couple of companies to achieve that specific goal. So how can you access this data? That would be here on the next slide. The travel impact model is free. The basically the entire model or the methodology is published on GitHub, and that same is true for the Scope 3 flight emissions or the past emission model. You can access this two ways. There's a public API. So you can set that up using the information on GitHub to access the data through the API. Or you can also contact Google, and on request, we will have an SFTP set up where we can transfer the data to you, and you can basically match this data with your past emissions reports, and then understand the actual emission, or your past travel reports, I should say, and then understand the emissions of your past travel and use that for corporate policy setting, for example. We will send out in the follow-up a form where you can actually contact Google if you're interested in working together with us on this exercise, or on these reports, and we're happy to get in contact with you specifically on the Scope 3 flight emissions. And very happy to be here again. I think I'm handing back to you, Alex, to talk about the actual case study that we've done together with Sabre.
Yep, perfect. Thank you so much, Dennis. And yeah, we just thought it would be good to go into a bit of detail on the potential impact of using some of this data at the level of granularity of things like the actual aircraft. Like, what does that actually do? So as Dennis referenced, two of our partners, so Google and Sabre, actually worked together on a case study where they took all of Sabre's 2023 data, and we're able to really get some good insight into where reductions could be made, for really having the greatest impact for their business. So from this case study, they learned quite a few interesting things. So some of them we'll talk about here. So one is that they learned that Sabre could have a lot of impact by focusing on long haul flights. Olivia actually mentioned something similar. Long haul flights tend to represent a disproportionate amount of emissions. So in this case, you can see that quite explicitly here, even though they only accounted for 21% of the total flights, they actually made up 77% of emissions. They also learned that having simple changes can make a big impact. So in this case, simply choosing a same day lower carbon alternative could save them up to 10% of emissions. So again, just referencing back to what both Olivia and Dennis touched on, that there is a way to reduce emissions without just cutting back on travel. And this is a really good example of that by sort of choosing smarter alternatives, you can still reduce emissions. And this is really in part because the TIM allows you to get that granularity in reporting. So two different flights operated by two different carriers on different aircraft will show different emissions, even if they have the same origin and destination, which allows you to choose a lower emitting flight. And I think these are all really valuable learnings to be getting as a business. And it really shows how using this data can allow businesses to be strategic as they target emissions reductions. I will also say that Google has run this kind of sort of insight study with other organizations, including Alphabet itself. And so we can say that this is not an isolated case with Sabre, that we really are seeing more and more that this kind of insight into sort of really targeted reductions can have a huge impact. Cool. So what is next? After this webinar, as we've mentioned before, we'll be following up with an email that will have a few next steps for you. So the first will be a link for a webinar survey. We would really appreciate it if you could tell us what you think. And also that is an excellent place to ask us questions. So if you have questions about any of the content that was covered today, please do let us know. We'd also love to hear from you. We love doing these webinars, being in touch with the industry. So let us know what kinds of topics you would like to see in the future. Next, if you are excited about the idea of using TIM for past emissions, if you've really seen the value of being able to get that granular, there's a form that we will be sending out, as Dennis has referenced. That form will allow you to tell Google that you're interested in potentially working with them to actually run some of this analysis. But it will also have in there the links for the API documentation. So if you are just sort of ready to dig in, if you've got your technical team sort of waiting on the sidelines to get going and dig into the data, the links will be there for you as well. And then lastly, we would love for you to stay in touch with us. You can find Travelist on LinkedIn. I will say in a totally unbiased way that I think our LinkedIn is super interesting. Our comms team is really great and posts lots of interesting stuff there. It's worth a follow. Go find us there. You can also sign up for our industry newsletter. You'll find that at the bottom of the page on travelist.org. If you do that, you'll get all of our news and updates when we have more webinars or announcements on exciting products, and you'll be the first to hear about them. And then just speaking of other webinars, as I mentioned at the top, this is actually the second webinar in our series this Northern Hemisphere autumn. So we've got a couple others coming up to keep your eye out for those invitations. Planned for November 30th, we'll be discussing certifications. And on the 24th of November, we'll be talking about the policy landscape for sustainability. So both of those should be super interesting and hopefully relevant for anyone involved in the broader sustainable travel space. So please do keep your eye out for those links. And with that, I just want to say thank you so much to our presenters. Thank you for such valuable information, all super interesting. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. As I said, please do keep an eye out on your email for those two links. We would love to hear from you in the webinar survey, and all the information about how to access the TIM for past emissions will also be in that Google form. So I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and see you next time. Bye-bye.